We're glad to have you back. You're watching TVC News at 10. And now to our coverage of the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. The Lagos State government has further confirmed its status as the nation's epicenter of the pandemic. The state has reported 1,040 new cases of COVID-19, according to gathered by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC). In a late-night tweet, the Disease Control Agency puts the total number of new cases recorded nationwide at 1,883, with one additional death. But now there is palpable fear over what decision the government could take in nipping the ugly trend in the bud.
The new wave of the spread of the coronavirus in Nigeria is generating serious concern within the country. This is because of the fear that the new variant of COVID-19 could be more deadly than the pre-existing virus. This fear is not misplaced because Nigeria's health facilities are under huge pressure right now, even without the high spread of the COVID-19 variant. The federal government is considering a possible lockdown in Lagos, Abuja, The federal government is considering a possible lockdown in Lagos, Abuja, and Plateau states because of the announcement by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control that the three states are recording the highest numbers of cases in the second wave of the spread of the deadly virus. Topping the heights of the government's fear is the very seriously growing need for more oxygen for patients in dire need of it, lack of bed spaces in health facilities, and the fear many Nigerians have for the COVID-19 vaccine, which is still being watched for efficacy and pass marks by both manufacturers and governments of nations. Current data from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control so far states that Nigeria has a record of 1,883 new cases. Lagos State recorded the highest number with 1,040 new cases of the virus. Till date, the country has had 130,557 cases across its 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, with 1,578 deaths, leaving tears and sorrow.
Joining me now live via Skype from Abuja is a medical doctor, Ebuta Agbo. Mr. Dr. Agbo, thank you for holding on, and thank you for joining us on TVC News at 10.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Nigerians.
So first of all, let's start with what seems to be more important. The choices open to the federal government. What would it be for you from the point of view of a medical doctor? Would it be a total lockdown, a second lockdown, or should it be partial restrictions?
The big question to ask is that what is the best practice and what would the best practice achieve? That question cannot be answered in absolute terms because we need to contextualize it to our situation in Nigeria. If we do a total lockdown or if we put in place a total lockdown, the crisis it will create, we have an economy of people, of 51% of our population have a job that they require.
Please reduce the volume of this thing.
They have a job that requires that they go to work every day of their life to earn a day's living. So that would totally be very disruptive. And if you disrupt the economic life of people, it will affect their health to a large extent. So the government would need to consider a halfway in between. And the position the government is taking now of considering some form of partial restrictions in some states that are mostly affected is something to consider and to look into critically. Again, before we talk further, it's also important to understand that the epicenter of the pandemic in Nigeria is probably in the FCT, in Jos, and then in Lagos. But it's going to shift finally. As the numbers in these three states saturate, it's going to shift to other states. So the big question is that what should be the plan? Even if we lock down Lagos, Jos, and FCT, what if it shifts to one or two other states? Let me not be too particular about any state. What if it shifts? What do we do? And then if you look at what has happened in the West, if you look at most times in the first wave in some of the countries in the West where there is data took about 6 months. In that 6 months, evidence suggests that about 30% of the population were affected. That when I mean evidence, I mean serological evidence. If you take that for the average state in Nigeria with a 6 million population, half of them will be adults, and those are the ones likely to test. If you do 30% of that, you are talking of about 1.8 million. Let us, no, we're talking about, yes, 1.8 million. Then let us stretch that analysis further. If 80% of that population are symptomatic, therefore no symptoms and no problem, that's fine. But 15% of the 1.8 million are basically going to have symptoms.
If those options are difficult choices for government to make, how then does government manage treatment and care for the critically ill particularly, and in the hospitals? How do you manage especially the prevention of transmission from those who are recovering because of because they must as a matter of necessity be in the same place with those who are critically ill?
Excellent question. Government must react appropriately. Number one, for states that do not have capacity, they must build their capacity now. You have some states that have 100 doctors in the government employment in a population with 6 million people. Are we kidding? That means one doctor to 60,000 Nigerians in those states. But that is government. Those are doctors or health workers in the government employment. So the government in those states have to consider opening up an opportunity, a formal opportunity for private sector medical doctors or health workers integration into the system. That's number one. And we already know that about 15% to 20% of the people who get COVID generally in the population would need some form of oxygen, either invasive or non-invasive oxygen. So we need to immediately build our capacity for providing oxygen. That means that we need to build plants immediately. They already made plants which can be well positioned, and then we need to set up a logistics system that delivers oxygen, because some patients do not need intubation, they don't need ventilators. What they need is high flow oxygen, and that is life-saving. The third thing we need to generally consider is the possibility of prophylaxis. There are certain medications that are being put out there. I think the government has to, the office of the presidency, the vice president had discussed the role of ivermectin, where Professor Bode Thomas did a presentation of a study that was put in place. Emerging evidence suggests one or two other potent treatment. These has to be provided.
All right, Dr. Agbo. Dr. Ebuta Agbo, we thank you very much. We could go on and on, but we must end the conversation here, and we hope that government makes informed decisions, perhaps considering some of the contributions that you have put forward here. We thank you for your time on TVC News at 10.
I appreciate it. Have a lovely day.